Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Eric Coffin. I'm speaking to you from the November 2018 edition of the Metal Investors Forum in Vancouver. I'm here with Jeff Wilson, the CEO of Precipitate Gold, a company that I was involved with at its inception a long time ago and that I remain a very big shareholder of. So I'm obviously keenly interested in their activities. Jeff just pulled off, in my opinion, a bit of a coup, getting a very reasonable option on a really interesting and impressive piece of real estate. Can you just sort of give us a bit of background on this new Pueblo Grande, as you call it?
Yeah, it's a new acquisition for us. We wanted to position ourselves in a piece with a piece of ground in a part of the country where mining was more prevalent and where activity was happening. Mines were being expanded, being permitted. And so we were looking in and around Pueblo Viejo, which is, as you know, one of the largest gold mines on the planet. And we identified some ground in that region that, thanks to one of my directors, who's very familiar to you, Alistair Waddell, we targeted this ground. He had coveted this ground for a long time. We recognized that it was in another junior company that was sort of shifting out of country and perhaps looking at a change of business. And that presented the opportunity for us to start conversations on a possible acquisition. Clearly on a map, it looks attractive because it's nearly engulfing the Pueblo Viejo mine of Barrick. But what we wanted to see first and foremost was, yes, this is an interesting location, but what's the geological potential? Right. And it was Alistair who was really able to paint that picture for us and give us the sense that there was something meaningful to go after here from an exploration standpoint.
And I think one area in particular you pointed out when you announced this acquisition, and it's an area that I know is near and dear to Alistair's heart. It's something that past workers, you got a really nice big database when you acquired the property. There has been a bunch of past work on it, but a couple of these areas specifically, and I think it's part of the reason why Alistair really wanted to go after it, was past workers never really attacked these specific target areas. Right. If you look on the map, there's very few drill holes, anything like that. That just wasn't, for whatever reason, they didn't go after this stuff.
Yeah. I said this in a recent conversation I had the other day. Often in our business, it's not the first or the second guy in that has the accolades and the big discovery success. And there's great benefit to being the third or the fourth or the fifth guy in, and to be able to benefit from that prior work and, finding out where things aren't and understanding how you can vector towards new targets. So you're correct, there was some quite compelling drill intercepts by prior operators in other parts of the project. They really weren't able to sort of have that stuff hang together. And they elected to sort of, use the typical sort of strategy, which is let's just step right across the concession boundary from the big mining pits onto our ground and drill there and drill a couple of deep holes. Again, not a lot of joy with that, but again, the differential sort of to this is that, our geological thesis, if you will, is that the mineralizing event for this is such that it's potentially a distinct body on this part of our ground, and it's not necessarily connected to the Pueblo Viejo deposit, but it's associated, perhaps as part of a broader system.
Not an extension of the high sulfidation system, so much as potentially a separate high sulfidation system.
Correct. Yeah, and that's supported by, as you know, the magnetic signature that is very similar to the magnetic signature that's seen over top of the Pueblo Viejo mining pits. We see a similar, very strong, high magnetic signature on this piece of ground as well. And that, along with alteration and various other geological information, gives us some, encouragement that this is a target worth testing. And as you said earlier, has not been drill tested.
Well, and I know if you're someone that's prone to doing Google searches on mineral deposits, and you have a pot of really strong coffee, there are in fact 2 or 3 journal papers, one of the authors of whom is in fact Alistair Waddell, and I have flipped through a couple of those. I know this whole mag-high magnetite layer on top is sort of part of his thesis, but I think you're also, part of your short-term game plan is to bring in more outside consultants and sort of get a consensus, I guess.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to target. This is why.
Yeah, exactly. I think going forward here, we've got some sequential sort of hurdles we want to get over. We want to close the transaction. Get our own proper evaluation of the data, QA, QC, that sort of thing. But I think again, such a big system at Pueblo Viejo, this is an area that has been studied and explored, sort of intellectually by a great number of very smart geological minds. And so we see an advantage in being able to approach some of those people, bring them in on a consultancy basis, put together a revised paper on the area's geology that includes some of the work that was done by prior operators, and sort of point us in the right directions in terms of basically vectoring for what would be prioritized drill targets. And so benefiting from, again, this prior information that's out there and these smart geological minds, we think will sort of fast track the process for us.
Well, actually, one thing I'll bring up too is that when you picked the project up, I was aware of it. I mean, obviously, I was aware of its previous life, if you will. Mm-hmm. And you talked about the sort of drilling along the boundary thing where that vendor was drilling really deep holes, trying to literally hit the Pueblo Viejo zones. But when I talked to you and Mike Moore, the VP Exploration, and Alistair, the targeting he's talking about is in fact much, much, much shallower than that. You don't expect to be drilling like monster holes to try to hit things here.
That's right. Yeah, and that's a critical part of it. I mean, initially we were concerned that the best targets might be 1,000-meter holes to try to find the down dip extension, which would be challenging to get the market interested in. So for us, yes, this new target, again, assuming that the information bears out, would be a very near surface, potentially open pittable type mineralization that's basically just been sort of undercover, if you will, underneath this lithocap alteration, this sort of silica cap. And so it's not sticking out of the ground, it's not outcropping. And really you've just got sort of a different weathering profile or erosion profile such that it was more exposed at Pueblo Viejo, but where we're located, that same sort of cover still exists, and so it requires geophysics to really start to identify that potential. Okay,
and I mean, last but not least, and the relatively shallow drilling feeds into this. The company is not really in any immediate need of doing a financing. Like you've been sort of husbanding your money. It's been a while since you guys have done a placement, but you've still got a fairly healthy bank account.
Yeah, we've been fortunate in that we raised a reasonable amount of money in 2016. We had an exercise of a substantial number of warrants that were in the money shortly thereafter. And we've done a deal on one of our secondary assets that's bringing in generating some income. So our treasury has stayed quite healthy over the course of the last 2 years since we did the last financing, more than 2 years. And we're now sitting on a treasury that, and I should say also this transaction to acquire this new project is very light on cash as well. And the thinking was we want to put money into the ground, not into the pockets of an outgoing company. So the cash component is $25,000, and that leaves us with lots of wiggle room financially to be able to initiate programs, get boots on the ground, bring in some of these consultants, start vectoring towards getting drill permits, the applications in, get ourselves permitted. And the hope here is that by the end of the first quarter of 2019, we're in a position to start contemplating the commencement of a drill program.
Okay, there you have it. It's a very interesting project surrounding one of the world's biggest gold mines. Exciting large-scale targets, and it looks like something that's actually going to develop pretty rapidly. So I think Precipitate again is a story you really want to be paying attention to, because I think after having gone through a bit of pain waiting for some other things in other parts of the world, you're going to see things accelerate now, start moving a lot faster, lots of news flow, lots of new targeting news, things like that. I mean, I think things are going to be really exciting going forward. Thanks for giving us a lowdown, Jeff.
My pleasure. Thanks.